After years in Congress, I never expected my greatest fight would be with my own HO when they shot my service dog, Max, for lowering property values and destroyed my life. But when they discovered who I really was and what power I held, their perfectly manicured world came crashing down. But would justice for Max come at the cost of my own career? Comment below where you're watching from. I still remember the day I moved into Oak Ridge Estates, my dream home with its perfect little garden where Max, my service dog, could finally have space to play. The golden retriever who'd saved my life countless times during my darkest moments after returning from overseas. If only I'd known that garden would become a battlefield. The first week was peaceful. I kept to myself, working remotely on housing bills that nobody knew about. That's how I liked it. Just another homeowner trying to live quietly. Max would help me through my PTSD episodes, his gentle presence keeping the memories at bay while I served in Congress under the radar. The neighbors smiled and waved, probably thinking I was just another work-from-home professional. Then came the first note. A pink piece of paper stuck to my door with writing so angry it had torn through in places. Unauthorized pet violation of HO codes. I couldn't help but laugh at first. They clearly hadn't done their homework about service animal laws. I pulled out my phone to take a picture. When I heard that voice for the first time, "You must be the new neighbor breaking our rules." The woman marching across my lawn had that look. Perfectly styled hair, designer yoga outfit, and a face twisted with the kind of entitlement that money can't buy. "I'm Karen Martinez, HOA Community Standards Committee Chair." She said it like she was announcing herself as queen. I kept my voice calm, years of congressional debates coming in handy. "Nice to meet you. I'm James, and this is Max, my service dog." I reached for his papers, but she was already shaking her head. "We don't allow large dogs here. They destroy property values. Barbara Thompson, our HOA president, has very specific guidelines about this." Karen's eyes narrowed at Max, who sat perfectly still beside me. "And really, you don't look disabled." My hand tightened on Max's leash. "Not all wounds are visible," I wanted to tell her. Instead, I smiled. "I understand your concern, but service animals are protected under federal law. I have all the proper documentation." She pulled out her phone, snapping pictures of my house, my garden, and Max. "We'll see about that." "This isn't over." Karen stormed off, her designer sneakers leaving little dents in my freshly watered lawn. That night I couldn't sleep. Max sensed my anxiety, staying closer than usual. I'd faced down hostile foreign governments, argued bills on the House floor, but something about Karen's threat felt different. Personal. While Max dozed beside my desk, I pulled up Oak Ridge Estates HOA regulations, scanning for any mention of service. Animals. Nothing. They'd never even considered it. The next morning, I found my garden fence spray-painted with the word violation in bright red. Through my security camera footage, I watched Karen, directing someone to do it at 6 a.m. The paint was still wet when I touched it, and Max's paw prints tracked red across the sidewalk. Exactly what they wanted. I was drafting an email to the HOA board when another knock came. This time it was Barbara Thompson herself, clutching a thick folder of complaints. She barely looked at me, her eyes fixed on Max with disgust. "Mr. Sullivan, we pride ourselves on maintaining certain standards here," she began, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in another neighborhood?" I felt Max press against my leg, grounding me like he always did during anxiety attacks. That's when I saw Karen in the background, filming everything on her phone, probably waiting for me to lose my temper. They had no idea who they were dealing with, or the laws they were breaking. But for now I needed to play this smart. "Thank you for your concern, Barbara. I'll review these complaints carefully." I accepted the folder with my congressional poker face, the same one I'd used during intense committee hearings. "By the way, does the HOA have insurance for federal housing law violations?" Her smile flickered for just a second. Behind her, Karen stopped filming. Neither of them knew it yet, but they'd just started a war they couldn't win. As I closed the door, I heard them whispering frantically. Max looked up at me with those knowing eyes, and I scratched behind his ears. "Don't worry, buddy. They have no idea what's coming." That night, more neighbors reported mysterious property damage to the HOA, all homes near mine. I watched through my window as Karen led Barbara around, pointing at houses, taking photos. My security cameras caught everything. The pieces were falling into place, but I had a sinking feeling this was just the beginning. What they'd do next would change everything, not just for me and Max, but for thousands of homeowners across America. I woke up to the sound of a camera clicking outside my window. There was Karen Martinez in her pink jogging suit, taking pictures of my front yard at 6:30 in the morning. Max's ears perked up, a low growl rumbling in his throat. This was the third time this week. Got to document all the dog poop that's ruining our property values, she yelled when she saw me. I hadn't even had my morning coffee yet. Max never left messes. His service dog training was impeccable. I knew this because I spent 2 years and $30,000 getting him specially trained after my last deployment. I grabbed my phone and started recording her trespassing on my property. Karen's face turned red as a tomato. You can't film me. This is harassment. She stamped her foot like a child having a tantrum. The irony was completely lost on her. Later that morning, I found printed flyers in everyone's mailbox about dangerous animals. In the neighborhood, with a grainy photo of Max sleeping in my front yard, Karen had drawn red circles around his massive fangs, which was actually just Max yawning. I kept one as evidence, adding it to my growing file of HOA harassment. My security cameras caught her sending her teenage son, Tommy, to plant fake dog waste in my yard that afternoon. The poor kid looked so embarrassed, mouthing sorry to my front door camera. I didn't blame him. Karen was the type of mom who'd ground him for refusing. The real trouble started during my evening walk with Max. We passed the community garden I'd helped plant last spring. Karen was there with Barbara Thompson, the HOA president, pointing at my tomato plants. They're not regulation height, Karen insisted, waving a ruler around. And who knows what diseases that dog could spread to our vegetables. I stopped, pulled out my phone, and played them the recording from our last HOA meeting, where they'd specifically approved my garden plans. Karen's face went through 50 shades of purple. You're not allowed to record meetings, she screeched. Actually, I'd checked state laws carefully before moving here. That night, I smelled something strange while making dinner. Max started barking frantically at the window. I rushed outside to find my entire garden wilting. Someone had doused it with industrial-strength weed killer. The tomato plants I'd grown for our community food bank were dying before my eyes. The cameras caught Karen's husband Mike doing the deed, wearing a black hoodie like some cartoon burglar. I called the police to file a report. Officer Martinez, no relation to Karen, thankfully, took photos and documented everything. You know, she said quietly, we've had 7 complaints about this HOA in the past month. She handed me her card with a knowing look. I added it to my file. The next morning, Karen had organized an emergency HOA meeting about property values. I watched through my window as neighbors filed into her house. Some looked uncomfortable, others eager for drama. Mrs. Jackson, my elderly neighbor who loved Max, caught my eye and slowly shook her head as she walked past. She slipped a note into my mailbox later. They're planning something big. Be careful. I sent clips from my security cameras to my old friend at the local news station, not for publication, just insurance. Then I sat down at my desk, pulled out my congressional letterhead, and began drafting a letter about discriminatory housing practices. My hands shook slightly as I typed, but Max pressed his head against my leg, grounding me like he always did. That's when I heard the first rock hit my window. I looked outside to see Tommy Martinez with tears in his eyes. His mother's hand gripped tight on his shoulder, forcing him to throw another. Other neighbors watched from their driveways, phones recording, no one daring to stop her. As the second rock shattered my living room window, I reached for my phone. Little did Karen know, but tomorrow's HOA meeting would have an unexpected guest. And this time, I wasn't coming as just another homeowner, but watching Max shake under my desk, traumatized by the noise. I wondered if I'd waited too long to reveal who I really was. I walked into the HOA meeting room, my heart pounding as Max quietly guided me to an empty chair. The room fell silent, except for Karen's loud whisper. He's breaking the rules again by bringing that dog in here. I took a deep breath, remembering my training from countless heated debates in Washington. This wasn't my first fight, but it was perhaps my most personal one. Barbara Thompson stood at the podium, her perfectly styled gray hair and pressed blazer matching her rigid personality. She smiled that fake smile I'd seen too many times. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have an urgent matter to discuss regarding unauthorized pets and property values. I felt every eye in the room turn to me and Max. A few neighbors quickly looked away, shame clear on their faces. They knew what was coming, but were too scared to stand up to the HOA board. I gently patted Max's head, drawing strength from his calm presence. Karen Martinez shot up from her seat, waving a stack of papers. I have documented evidence of this dog urinating on my prize-winning roses. My children can't even play in our yard anymore because of their severe allergies. I had to hold back a laugh. Her kids were at the community pool just yesterday, playing with the Watson's Labrador without any problems. I stood slowly, pulling out Max's service, animal certification, and a copy of the Fair Housing Act. Max is a registered service animal, and under federal law, Karen's shrill voice cut me off. We don't care about your supposed federal laws. This is a private community. We make our own rules. Her face was turning red as she walked towards me, pointing her finger. My property values have dropped 15% since you moved in with that mutt. The room erupted in chaos. Some residents started shouting about their own property values, while others tried to defend me. Through the noise, I noticed Tom Thompson, Barbara's husband, filming everything on his phone with a smirk. I'd later learn why that smirk would cost him everything. If I may, I said calmly, my voice cutting through the noise like it did on the house floor. I've taken the liberty of pulling our neighborhood's property records. I opened my laptop, connecting it to the projector. Actually, property values have increased by 12% since I moved in. The only decrease was after Karen's unauthorized pool installation cracked her neighbor's foundation. The room went dead silent. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I wasn't done. I also have satellite images showing that Barbara's new fence extends 3 feet into public land, which is why I've been getting citations about Max being off-leash in what is actually a public space. Barbara's face went pale. This meeting is adjourned, she announced quickly, gathering her papers, but the damage was done. Other residents started raising their hands, wanting to share their own stories of harassment and unfair treatment. That's when Karen lost it completely. She marched up to Max, who sat perfectly still despite her aggressive approach. This dog is dangerous! Look at how it's growling at me. Max wasn't making a sound, and everyone could see it. He tried to attack my precious Bella just yesterday! I pulled out my phone, playing a security camera clip from my front yard. You mean when your unleashed chihuahua charged at us while Max calmly guided me away? The video played clearly for everyone to see. Several neighbors gasped. Barbara banged her gavel desperately. This is unauthorized recording. You can't. Actually, I said, my voice steady. The HOA bylaws only prohibit recording of private residences. Common areas are fair game. Years of reading legislative fine print had finally paid off. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, I noticed Tom slip out a side door, phone in hand. He was texting someone frantically. Max's ears perked up, sensing something I couldn't. If only I'd paid more attention to that detail. Maybe I could have prevented what happened next. Karen stormed out, yelling over her shoulder. This isn't over! You'll regret moving into my neighborhood! Her words sent a chill down my spine. Not because I was scared, but because I knew that people like Karen and Barbara were exactly why. I'd spent my career fighting for housing reform. They just didn't know who they were really dealing with. Yet, as Max and I walked home under the setting sun, I noticed several neighbors taking down their "No Pets Allowed" signs. Small victories, I thought, but something in the air felt different. Dangerous. Max, as usual, relaxed gait was tense, alert. He could sense what I was starting to realize. This wasn't just about a service dog anymore. This was about power, control, and what happens when someone finally stands up to bullies. I had no idea that tomorrow morning would change everything. I woke up early that Sunday morning to the sound of birds chirping. Max's gentle nudge against my hand told me it was time for our morning routine. The sun was barely peeking through the clouds, and the grass was still wet with dew. Perfect weather for Max's training exercises. As I stepped into my backyard, something felt off. The usual peace of our morning ritual was broken by hushed whispers coming from Karen's yard. I tried to ignore it. We'd gotten used to her constant spying. Max stayed focused on his tasks, just like he was trained to do. His golden fur caught the morning light as he helped me maintain my balance, a daily reminder of why he was so much more than just a pet. I heard Karen's back door slam. You're filming this, right, Tom? Her shrill voice carried over the fence. We need evidence of this nuisance. I took a deep breath, choosing to focus on Max instead. We'd already filed 3 police reports about their harassment, and my lawyer was building a solid case. Max's ears suddenly perked up. He shifted his body slightly, placing himself between me and the fence. Something he only did when he sensed danger. I heard footsteps crunching on leaves, moving along the property line where Karen had been complaining about my unauthorized garden bed. Hey, your mutt is threatening my wife! Tom's voice boomed from behind the fence. I turned slowly, keeping my voice steady like I'd learned to do during tense congressional negotiations. Max is a trained service animal, Tom. He's not threatening anyone. Karen's face appeared above the fence, her phone pointed at us. We've warned you about this dangerous animal. The property values are dropping because of you. Her voice cracked with that same entitled anger I'd heard at every HOA meeting. I reached for my own phone, ready to record whatever false claims they were about to make. That's when I saw Tom emerge from behind his garage, holding something that made my blood run cold. The morning sun glinted off the metal of his home security weapon. Tom, I said calmly, raising my hands, think very carefully about what you're doing. Max stayed perfectly still, his training kicking in despite the tension. He was doing exactly what he was supposed to do, keeping me safe, staying calm. "I'm the head of neighborhood security," Tom shouted, his face red with anger. "And I'm protecting our community." Karen was still filming, her smile growing wider with each passing second. Everything happened so fast after that. A neighbor's car backfired in the distance. Karen screamed something about attacking. Tom's finger tightened on the trigger. I lunged for Max, but I was too slow. The shot echoed through the quiet morning like a crack of thunder. Max's yelp of pain shattered my world into a million pieces. My brave, gentle partner collapsed onto our freshly cut grass, his golden fur staining red. "Self-defense!" Karen shrieked, still filming. We all saw it. The dog was aggressive, but her voice faltered as other neighbors began emerging from their homes. Phones raised, capturing the truth of what just happened. I cradled Max's head in my lap, my training keeping me clear-headed enough to apply pressure to his wound. His brown eyes looked up at me, full of trust even now. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called. Weapon. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, pressing the emergency contact I'd hoped I'd never need. "Sarah, it's James. Get the legal team now." I heard Karen's sharp intake of breath as she finally recognized my voice, the same voice she'd heard on C-SPAN just last week during the Housing Committee hearing. Tom's weapon clattered to the ground, but none of that mattered. Not Karen's stammering excuses, not Tom's suddenly pale face, not even the approaching police sirens. All that mattered was Max's heartbeat under my hands, growing weaker by the second. As I lifted my brave partner into my car, I made two promises. Max would survive, and the people responsible for this would learn exactly why you don't mess with a congressman's service dog. The neighbors who had gathered watched in stunned silence as I sped toward the emergency vet, leaving Karen and Tom to face the army of law enforcement. Approaching our once quiet street, they wanted a fight over property values. They were about to learn the true cost of their actions. But would Max survive long enough for me to deliver the justice he deserved? My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I sat in the emergency vet's waiting room. Max's blood still staining my favorite blue shirt. The tick-tock of the wall clock felt like torture as I waited for news. Every time the door swung open, my heart jumped, hoping for updates about my best friend's condition. My phone buzzed. Sarah, my chief of staff, was calling for the 5th time. I finally picked up, my voice barely a whisper. "They shot him, Sarah. They actually shot my dog." "Sir, you need to turn on the news right now," she said, her voice urgent. "Someone posted a video of the shooting on social media. It's everywhere." I pulled out my tablet with trembling fingers and clicked the first news link she sent. There it was, shaky phone. Footage from my neighbor's second-story window showing everything. Tom with his gun, Karen screaming about property values, and Max's yelp that would haunt my nightmares forever. The video had over 1 million views already. The emergency room doors burst open. Barbara Thompson stormed in, her designer handbag swinging wildly as she waved her phone in my face. "You're him!" "You're actually him." Her perfectly made-up face had gone pale, mascara slightly smeared. "You're Congressman Sullivan!" I stood up slowly, drawing myself to my full height. Years of keeping my identity private while living in the community had just crumbled. "Yes, Barbara, I am. And you and your husband just shot a congressionally protected service animal on video." She stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a chair. But you never said anything. You let us think you were just another homeowner." "I wanted to live quietly, Barbara. To work on my housing reform bill without drawing attention. I chose your community because the listing promised peaceful living. Instead, you harassed a disabled veteran and his service dog for months." Karen burst through the doors next, her face red with anger but fear flickering in her eyes. "This is a trick! He's lying!" But her voice cracked when she saw the news playing silently on the waiting room. TV, my official congressional photo, next to footage of the shooting. My phone buzzed again. Messages flooded in from other members of Congress, the media, veteran groups, and disability advocates. Justice for Max was trending nationwide. The young vet tech who'd taken Max back appeared, still in her bloody scrubs. I rushed to her, my heart in my throat. Barbara and Karen fell silent, probably realizing just how much trouble they were in. "He's stable," the vet tech said softly. "The bullet missed his vital organs, but he'll need surgery. Dr. Patterson wants to talk to you about the procedure." Relief flooded through me, but anger quickly followed. I turned to Barbara and Karen, who were now huddled together near the exit. "I've spent the last year working on housing reform legislation. But now I'm adding specific provisions about service animals and HOA oversight. Your actions just became Exhibit A in congressional hearings." Karen's face crumpled. "But our property values, our community standards, your property values?" I laughed bitterly. "Check your real estate apps, Karen. News travels fast. Houses in Oak Ridge Estates are already being listed below market value. Turns out shooting a congressman's service dog isn't great for the neighborhood's reputation. Barbara grabbed her phone, frantically scrolling through Zillow. Her gasp told me she'd seen the plummeting prices. "We can fix this," she pleaded. "We'll drop all the complaints, pay the vet bills." "It's too late," I said, pulling out a folder from my briefcase. "This is what justice looks like." Inside were copies of every harassing letter they'd sent, photos of my vandalized garden, and recordings of their discriminatory HOA meetings. "The FBI is already investigating. Service animal interference is a federal crime." The vet tech returned. "Sir, Dr. Patterson is ready for you." I gathered my things, watching Barbara sink into a chair, her face in her hands. Karen was still frozen, staring at her phone as angry comments flooded the HOA's social media pages. As I walked through the doors to see Max, I heard Barbara whisper, "What have we done?" My hand rested on the door handle as I looked back one last time. "You tried to destroy my life and hurt my dog because you thought I was powerless. Now you get to learn what real power looks like. The power of the law you tried so hard to ignore." The next few hours would change everything, but right now, all that mattered was Max. As I stepped through those doors, I couldn't help but wonder, would saving him cost me everything I'd worked for in Congress, or would this become the defining moment of my career? The morning news vans lined our once quiet street like vultures. I watched from my window as Karen Martinez paced her front lawn in her designer yoga pants, desperately trying to shoo away reporters while clutching her phone to her ear. The look of panic on her face was a stark change from her usual smug expression. Max's blood hadn't even dried on my back patio, and already their perfect world was crumbling. My phone buzzed again, another text from my chief of staff. The story had reached national headlines. Congressmember's service dog shot by HOA board member. Social media was exploding with fury. I clicked through Twitter, watching the security camera footage I'd released go viral. The clear audio of Karen screaming about property values seconds before. Tom fired the shot was damning. No amount of spin could save them now. A knock at my door made Max whimper from his bed. His bandaged side was a constant reminder of what they'd done. Through the peephole, I saw Barbara Thompson wringing her hands, her usual perfectly styled hair now disheveled. I opened the door just enough to hear her stammered plea. "Congressman Sullivan, please. We can work something out. We didn't know who you were. Karen was just trying to protect our community standards." Tom made a terrible mistake. "What will it take to keep this quiet?" I felt a cold smile spread across my face. "Protect community standards? Let me show you something, Barbara." I pulled out my tablet, opening the file my team had compiled. "Here's every HOA violation notice in Oak Ridge Estates for the past 5 years. Notice anything strange about who received them?" Her face went pale as I scrolled through the data. Every single complaint about pets, yard maintenance, and community standards had been filed against minorities, disabled residents, or elderly homeowners on fixed incomes. The pattern was impossible to ignore. "This isn't just about Max anymore," I said quietly. "While you were busy harassing my service dog, my office was investigating HOA abuse across the country. Oak Ridge Estates just became Exhibit A. A commotion down the street caught our attention." Karen was now screaming at a reporter who dared to step onto her precious lawn. "You don't understand! Property values are everything. We can't have dogs running around. It attracts the wrong kind of people." The reporter's camera caught every word. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. My phone buzzed again. The housing reform bill I'd been quietly working on for months was suddenly gaining massive support. Colleagues who'd been on the fence were now calling to co-sponsor. Funny how a viral video of HOA abuse against a congressman's service dog could change political winds. Barbara was still standing there, trembling. "What do you want from us?" I handed her a thick envelope. "Here's your chance to do the right thing. Inside is my proposal for a complete overhaul of Oak Ridge Estates governance, new board elections, third-party oversight, and mandatory civil rights training for all board members. Sign it now, or I'll add your discrimination data to my congressional testimony next week." She snatched the envelope, but her hands shook so badly she could barely open it. Behind her, I saw Tom being led out of his house in handcuffs. The police had finally arrived to arrest him for animal cruelty and reckless discharge of a firearm. Karen was now crying into her phone, probably calling her lawyer. Max limped to my side, his tail wagging weakly as he watched the scene unfold. I scratched behind his ears, remembering all the nights he'd helped me through PTSD episodes. "How dare they try to take him from me?" A new text lit up my phone. Photos from a resident showing years of HOA, documents being shredded in Barbara's garage last night. More evidence for the investigation. The house of cards was falling faster than they could cover their tracks. Protesters started gathering at the community entrance, holding signs with Max's picture and demanding justice. Local news crews interviewed, Residents who'd been silenced by HOA threats for years. One elderly woman wept as she described being fined into near bankruptcy for having a wheelchair ramp. A Latino family showed documentation of being cited for cooking odors from traditional family meals. Barbara's hand trembled as she signed the documents. "Please," she whispered. "My husband's on the city council. This will ruin us." I took the papers, checking each signature. You should have thought of that before shooting a congressman's service dog. But don't worry. You'll have plenty of time to think about it during the federal investigation. As she hurried away, I saw Karen being interviewed on live TV, trying to defend herself. "I had no idea he was in Congress. We just wanted to maintain our standards. Dogs reduce property values by 15%. The reporter cut her off. "Ma'am, are you aware that discriminating against service animals is a federal crime, regardless of the owner's position?" I closed my door, sitting down heavily next to Max. My phone kept buzzing. Calls from major networks, other Congress members, disability rights organizations. Tomorrow I'd deal with it all. Tomorrow, I'd start turning this nightmare into real change. But tonight, watching through my window as karma did its work, I held Max close and whispered, "We got them, buddy. We finally got them." Outside, another news van pulled up, and I couldn't help but wonder how many other HOAs across America were about to face their own day of reckoning. The doctor said Max would never walk the same way again. But they didn't know my dog's spirit. I watched him take his first shaky steps in our living room, his golden fur still patchy from the surgery. The news vans outside had finally left, but the damage to Oak Ridge Estates was permanent. Every time Max flinched at a loud noise, my heart broke all over again. Karen Martinez's perfect world was crumbling. I heard she tried selling her house, but nobody wanted to buy from the woman who helped shoot a congressman's service dog. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from other representatives and senators, asking about Max. The story had struck a nerve across the country. Last week, I caught Karen trying to sneak into my backyard with her phone, probably looking for something else to complain about. But this time, I was ready. The security cameras I installed caught everything, including her attempt to plant fake evidence of dog waste. The police weren't as friendly to her this time. Barbara Thompson, our former HOA president, sent me a letter begging to meet. She wanted to explain everything and make it right. I read her letter twice before letting Max use it as a chew toy. Their fake apologies meant nothing. I had uncovered years of their dirty work. Other homeowners started coming forward with stories about how Barbara and Karen had targeted elderly residents, single parents, and minorities with made-up violations. The media dug deeper into our HOA's history. They found recordings of board meetings where Karen bragged about forcing a young widow to sell her house because her crying baby was a nuisance. Barbara had written emails about keeping certain people out of the neighborhood to protect our values. Their own words became their worst enemy. My team discovered that Tom, Barbara's husband who shot Max, had been lying about his security credentials. He never had a license to carry a firearm as the HOA's security coordinator. The police were very interested in that detail. Max's physical therapy sessions became the highlight of our weeks. Other dog owners in the neighborhood would stop by with treats and support. Even Mrs. Jackson, who used to complain about every little thing, brought over homemade dog biscuits. The community was healing, but not everyone was happy about it. Karen tried starting a counter-campaign on social media, claiming she was the real victim. She posted edited videos of Max barking, but my security footage showed her deliberately agitating him through the fence. Her followers dropped faster than the neighborhood's property values. The most surprising support came from Karen's own teenage daughter, Emma. She visited one afternoon, tears in her eyes, to apologize for her mother's behavior. She had been secretly recording Karen's HOA meetings for months, disgusted by how they treated people. Emma's evidence became crucial for the federal investigation. Last night, I watched Max play with the neighbor kids for the first time since the shooting. He still limped, but his tail wagged like crazy. A reporter asked me if I would drop the charges if Barbara and Karen apologized. I looked at Max, remembered the blood on his fur, the terror in his eyes, and the nights of pain. Some things can't be fixed with just sorry. The old HOA board's office was empty now, their precious rulebooks collecting dust. The interim resident council found documents showing how Barbara and Karen had been funneling HOA fees into their personal accounts for years. They thought they were untouchable in their perfect little kingdom. They never expected a congressman and his three-legged dog to bring it all down. Tomorrow, Max has another vet checkup. His recovery is slow, but he's teaching me something new every day about resilience. As I sit on my porch watching the sunset, I see Karen packing boxes into her car. Her house finally sold at half her asking price. Sometimes karma has a way of making things right, but as I look at the certified letter on my desk from her lawyer, I wonder if this fight is really over, or if she has one last desperate move planned.